Tonight was a big night for rebuilding teams in the NBA as the NBA draft lottery went down and we officially have the full order set for the first 14 picks in the draft this year. Because of this, it's now the perfect time to put out another installment in this mock draft series that we do here on this channel leading up to the real thing. This year's draft is stacked with talent top to bottom, and especially with that top tier crop of talent, there are quite a few players that could all be vying for the number one pick. Before we get into the mock draft though, it turns out about 62% of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so please, if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I'd also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. Starting with the number one pick in the draft, the Detroit Pistons won the draft lottery, and with this pick, they select Cade Cunningham from Oklahoma State. Cunningham entered the season viewed by most as the top prospect in the class. He had an absolutely phenomenal season in college this year and cemented himself as the prize of the class. He's a point guard with a big, strong body. He can score from all three levels. His court vision and playmaking ability is phenomenal, and he has all the makings of a two-way stud. The Pistons' rebuild is in good hands with him leading the way, as I would be surprised if he wasn't the first name called on draft night this year. Next up, the second pick went to the Houston Rockets, and with this pick they select Evan Mobley from USC. While Cunningham is viewed as the top dog this year, Mobley is literally right behind him, and in many ways could be seen as the number one guy in his own right. He's far and away the best big man prospect in the draft. He has all the tools to dominate the defensive end of the floor, he blocks a ton of shots, and he moves his feet incredibly well for someone his size. He provides terrific energy, he runs the floor, and he finishes with great touch around the basket too, so he checks nearly every box you want from a modern-day big man. The Rockets have a nice budding core of Kevin Porter Jr. and Christian Wood to build around, and with the addition of Mobley, it'll solidify their front court and give them a defensive pillar to develop for years to come. Next up, the third pick went to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and with it they select Jalen Green from G League Ignite. After those top two players, there are quite a few names worthy of selection from the range of picks 3 to 5, but based on need above all, the Cavaliers go with Green here. With their backcourt set with Colin Sexton and Darius Garland, the Cavaliers should look to bring in a wing player, and Green is not only the best option, but he very well may be the best scorer in the entire draft. Green played in the G League this season, and even though he was inconsistent at times, he was able to put up some very impressive numbers and produce while playing against professional grown men as opposed to most prospects playing in college this year. He's explosive, he is a bucket getter, and he'll be another terrific weapon for this young Cavaliers team. Next up, the fourth pick went to the Toronto Raptors, and with it they select Jalen Suggs from Gonzaga. Suggs was the hero of the Final Four as he sank a half-court buzzer beater to get his team to the championship game, but even past that moment, he was one of the most reliable and consistent prospects in all of college basketball this season. He can play either guard position on both offense and defense, he's a floor general that creates for those around him, and when he's aggressive, he can heat up and score a lot of points in bunches. He has one of the most well-balanced games in the class, and for a Raptors team that always prioritizes players that give effort on both ends of the floor, he'll fit right into the culture there. Next up, the fifth pick went to the Orlando Magic, and with it they select Jonathan Kuminga from G League Ignite. Kuminga is the final player that I view as being in the top tier of players in this draft, and I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him picked as high as third overall. He's much more of a project than some of the other names I've mentioned already, but he's also arguably someone with a higher ceiling than all of them. He's a wing player with all of the tools to be a phenomenal defender, his athleticism and physical tools are all off the charts, and offensively, he's developing very well. His potential will be based on how much his perimeter jumper improves, because even though he's shown glimpses of being able to convert from the outside, he is still wildly consistent there, but in Orlando, he'll have plenty of time to improve. Next up is the sixth pick, which went to the Oklahoma City Thunder, and with it they select Scotty Barnes from Florida State. Barnes is the jack-of-all-trades prospect in this year's draft and has been compared to Draymond Green for this reason. Easily one of the best defensive prospects in the draft, he's 6'8" with the mobility, instincts, and disruptive ability to cause havoc for whoever he's covering. Then offensively, he's once again compared to Draymond in that he's someone who can be used as a secondary playmaker, kind of like a point forward, but he does need to work on his actual scoring ability. He's a winning player who may not be flashy, but he brings a skill set where he does all of the little things that teams would love to have. Next up, the 7th pick went to the Golden State Warriors, and with it they select Davion Mitchell from Baylor. Mitchell helped lead Baylor to a national title this year, and he is easily the best perimeter defender in the draft. He absolutely hounds opposing ball handlers and forces turnovers at a rate where you could stick him on other teams' best guard and he'll make their life hell. Offensively, he showed a ton of improvement this season, where he shot 51% from the field and 45% from 3, and even though he's one of the older prospects in the draft at 22 years old, he's also one of the most NBA-ready guys in the draft for a Warriors team hoping to get back to the postseason next year. Next up, the 8th pick went to the Orlando Magic as a result of their trade with the Chicago Bulls, and with it they select Moses Moody from Arkansas. You'll notice a trend so far as I say this, but Moody is also a very strong perimeter defender in this draft, and like many of the other top prospects in this draft, it will be tempting for a team to take him in the top 10. He's probably the player that fits the label of 3-and-D the most, but he did average about 17 points per game this season as a freshman, and was able to score in more ways than just spot-up shooting. The Magic took a swing at a player that's a project at number 5 earlier on, so here they'll probably look to make a safer pick like Moody is. Up next, the 9th pick went to the Sacramento Kings, and with it they select Jalen Johnson from Duke. Johnson may not have had the freshman season that he was hoping for at Duke, as it ended with him leaving early to prepare for the draft, but despite that, his upside is too high to ignore. He's a strong, big-bodied forward that can play multiple positions on both ends, he plays hard and runs the floor, and he's a very good passer for a player at his position who plays unselfishly. He is admittedly a bit of a risky pick based on his inconsistency at Duke, but I still see a team taking a gamble on him fairly early on. Next up, the 10th pick went to the New Orleans Pelicans, and with it they select Corey Kispert from Gonzaga. The Pelicans need to start prioritizing Zion Williamson, and in order to do so, they need shooting and lots of it. Kispert is very easily the best shooter in the draft this year, and his lights-out shooting will translate seamlessly to the NBA game. On top of that, he does well cutting off the ball, he has a solid mid-range game, and even showed improvement as a finisher at the basket this year. Next up, the 11th pick went to the Charlotte Hornets, and with it they select James Bouknight from UConn. The Hornets are likely losing Devontae Graham to free agency this offseason, so bringing in another guard that can score and handle the ball would make sense for them in the draft to plug in alongside LaMelo Ball for the team's future. Bouknight is as explosive of a scorer as there is in the draft this year, and even though his production dipped a little bit in the second half of the season, he did suffer an injury that held him back in that span, so it kind of is reasonable. At full strength, he's someone who could become a reliable sixth man or even a secondary scorer in a lineup one day for sure. Next up, the 12th pick went to the San Antonio Spurs, and with it they select Franz Wagner from Michigan. Wagner brings a ton of versatility on both offense and defense, and if there's one thing Spurs coach Greg Popovich loves over the years, it's skilled, versatile players to develop and get the most out of. He's a smart defensive player, he gives you a little bit of everything on offense, and should make for a very solid player in any team's rotation. Up next, the 13th pick went to the Indiana Pacers, and with it they select Keon Johnson from Tennessee. Johnson is very raw right now as a prospect, but he's been labeled by many as the most naturally gifted athlete in the draft, with an incredibly quick first step, terrific bounce, tenacity on defense that can't be taught. He has very glaring weaknesses as a shot creator and scorer right now, his jumper needs a lot of work, and he'll definitely be a few years away from giving genuinely positive production, but he reminds me a lot of Patrick Williams from last year's draft, and he just had a great season with the Chicago Bulls after being labeled as a project last year too. And finally, the 14th pick in the draft went to the Golden State Warriors, and with it, they select Josh Giddey from the NBL. Giddey's stock has risen a ton over the last few months, as he finished the year in Australia very strong. He's a 6'8" point guard with phenomenal playmaking ability and feel for the game, and he's a triple-double machine capable of stuffing the stat sheet on any given night. He's gonna need to add strength to his body, and he'll also need to improve as a shooter, having only made 29% of his threes on the year in Australia, but his feel for the game cannot be taught, and at his size, it's definitely worth it to take a swing on him. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below who you want your favorite team to draft this year. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.